which is why I'll be looking over there quite a bit during the video. So without further ado, let's get started. So, when Son of Sam first hit the morning of July 29th, 1976, no one expected a serial killer to make his debut. Two young women, 18-year-old brunette Donna Loria and her 19-year-old friend Jody Valentini, were chatting in Jody's car near the entrance to Loria's apartment building in the Bronx, New York. Because of the dangerous hour, 1 o'clock in the morning, their parents stopped by the car on the way home from an evening trip and said it was time to go upstairs. Donna promised to do it, but when the parents got in, Donna noticed a man next to their car. "Who is this guy?" she asked. "What does he want?" Her question was not answered. The man pulled a Charter Arms 44 Bulldog pistol from a paper bag, crouched down, and fired 5 times into the car. Donna was unalived instantly from a blow to the neck. Shot in the thigh, Jody leaned against the horn as the man continued to pull the trigger, even though the chamber of the gun was now empty. Jody ran out of the car, screaming for help. Soon, Donna's father heard the noise and ran downstairs. In his pajamas and bare feet, he drove to the hospital, hoping that the doctors could save his daughter. The police did not find a motive for the attack. In the end, they think it could have been either a mass execution or a lone psycho. Half in shock, Jody somehow managed to describe their attacker, but his description was unclear and vague due to the distress that she was under at the time. On the night of October 23rd, 1976, 3 months after the senseless unaliving of the Loria girl, 20-year-old Carl DeNaro was drinking beer with his friends in a bar in Queens. He would soon join the Air Force for at least 4 years in a few days. He wanted to experience his last days with friends because it would be a while before he saw them again. Among his party was a girl he knew from college, Rosemary Keenan. The party broke up after 2:30 in the morning and Carl drove Rosemary home. The couple parked next to her home and talked. Suddenly, a man appeared on the passenger side. He pulled out a gun and fired 5 times into the car, wounding Carl in the head. Horrified, Rosemary drove back to the bar where her friends took Carl to the hospital. This killer was randomly targeting people. On Tuesday evening, March 8th, 1977, Virginia, I'm just going to say Virginia V because she has a complicated last name and I really don't want to butcher it. So Virginia V, an attractive young honor student at Barnard College, was walking home from class in the affluent Foreign Hills Garden neighborhood. Virginia was a very talented and hardworking young woman who fled Bulgaria with her family in the late 1950s. As she followed Dartmouth Street on her way home, a man approached her from the opposite direction. When they were close, he pulled out a .44 and pointed it at her. She raised a book in her hand to protect herself, but one shot hit her in the face. Virginia passed away immediately. As the killer fled, he passed a man who saw everything. "Hello, sir," the killer said to the middle-aged man. A passing patrol car noticed the man running. However, when they heard on the radio that a woman had been shot on Dartmouth Street, they abandoned their plan to stop the suspicious man and immediately rushed to the crime scene. The police felt helpless and could not find the killer. Those murders also took a huge toll on the officers who were constantly working to try and find every possible lead. As suspected, this ghost murderer reappeared. On April 17th, 1977, two young lovers sat kissing in their parked car near Hutchinson River Parkway, where Donna Loria had been murdered the previous year. 18-year-old actress and aspiring model Valentina Serrani was sitting in a car with her 20-year-old boyfriend, tow truck driver Alexander S.O. At 3 o'clock that Sunday, another car stopped next to them. Its driver shot each of them twice. Valentina passed away police were under terrible pressure. Everyone began to doubt his ability to catch this murderer. The letter tied everything together. Now it was for sure that it was one man against the entire city. He wrote to this officer, but he was not the captain that he wrote about. Every cop was after him, all 25,000 of them. Dr. Martin Lubin, former director of Bellevue Forensic Psychiatry, and about 45 other psychiatrists gathered to present a psychological profile of the man they were looking for. In 1977, the police knew they were looking for a paranoid schizophrenic who may believe that he is under demonic possession. The killer was almost certainly a loner who had difficulty with relationships, especially with women. Task Force Omega, the task force set up to find Son of Sam, was flooded with calls every single day. Everyone seemed to know the killer. He was the neighbor who came home late every night. He was the weird brother-in-law who played with guns all the time. The weird guy at the bar who hated pretty girls. The list of suspects was endless. All those thousands of leads had to be reviewed and rejected, which was a huge undertaking for any team. While the police were chasing down every suspect, checking registrations for .44 caliber weapons, tracing activities of former mental patients, and generally running themselves ragged, the Son of Sam had become emboldened by the publicity. He decided to write another letter to Jimmy Breslin, a reporter of the Daily News. Again, I'm going to read a direct quote. That is not the entire letter, but the beginning part of it. So, quote, "Hello from the cracks in the sidewalks of NYC and from the ants that dwell in these cracks and feed in the dried blood of the dead that has settled into the cracks. Hello from the gutters of NYC, which is filled with dog manure, vomit, stale wine, urine, and blood. Hello from the sewers of NYC, which swallow up these delicacies when they are washed away by the sweeper trucks. Don't think because you haven't heard from me for a while that I went to sleep. No, rather, I am still here, like a spirit roaming the night, thirsty, hungry, seldom stopping to rest, anxious to please Sam." End quote. On June 10th, a man named Jack Cassara, who lived in New Rochelle, found an odd note in his mailbox from someone named Carr in Yonkers. The card included a picture of a German Shepherd dog. It read, quote, "Dear Jack, I'm sorry to hear about that fall you took from the roof of your house. Just want to say I'm sorry, but I'm sure it won't be long until you feel much better, healthy, and very strong. But please be careful next time, since you're going to be confined for a long time. Let us know if Nan needs anything. Sincerely, Sam and Francis." Cassara did not fall from the roof and had never met a Sam or Francis. He called them, and after discussing the strange situation, they agreed to meet at the house that night. The Carrs told the Cassaras about the strange letters they received, about their dog Harvey, and how their dog was shot. Sam Carr told them about a German Shepherd in the neighborhood who had also been shot. Carr asked his daughter, Wheat, a Yonkers police officer, to bring officers into this to investigate, while Cassara contacted the New Rochelle police. Then Cassara's 19-year-old son Stefano made an interesting conclusion. mentioned that Craig Glassman, a deputy sheriff and Berkowitz's neighbor, received an anonymous letter about a demonic group that included Glassman, Casara, and the Cars. The only thing that showed through was that Berkowitz was a little strange, but he did not feel that he was the murderer son of Sam. The police often encounter strange but perfectly legal behavior from citizens and cannot do much about it. Meanwhile, Chamberlain and the Intervalo of the Yonkers police entered Berkowitz's name into their computer and found his address, the license plate number of a Ford Galaxy, and that his driver's license had recently been suspended. On August 3rd, 1977, two Yonkers police officers, Chamberlain and Intervalo, talked about the strange letters the Cars had received and the shootings of the two dogs, Cars Labrador and a Wicker Street German Shepherd. They were worried that if they started investigating David Berkowitz, it would look like they were trying to do detective work and not simply patrol. They proceeded cautiously, asking the state's computer network for Berkowitz. The computer gave a brief profile on his driver's license. Several witnesses described Berkowitz as being about the same age, height, and build as Son of Sam was described to be. Security officers spoke with the rental agent at the house where Berkowitz lived at 35 Pine Street. All he could say was that he paid his rent on time and that he wrote on his rent that he worked for the IBI security in Queens. This information suggested that Berkowitz probably had some knowledge of weapons while working for a security firm. Later, they called the IBI and learned that Berkowitz had resigned in July 1976 to work for a taxi company. The first Son of Sam murder also occurred in July of 1976. They called several hundred taxi companies in the Bronx. None of them had ever heard of David Berkowitz. However, hundreds of other taxi companies operate in the greater New York area. For all of them, calling seemed overwhelming, but the two officers were sure that they had something and trusted their superior, who was impressed by the information that they had gathered thus far. He told them to talk to the New York detective Richard Salzman. They showed Salzman all of the letters. Yonkers police officer Chamberlain then responded to a call regarding a suspected arson at Berkowitz's apartment building at 35 Pine Street. The call was made by a male paramedic and a part-time duty sheriff, Craig Glassman. Glassman explained what happened. Quote, "I smelled smoke and ran to the door. When it opened, the fire was almost out. It probably never got hot enough to fire bullets." End quote. He showed Chamberlain a .22 caliber that had been fired at the door. Glassman then showed them the letters that he had received from Berkowitz, who had lived above him. The handwriting looked similar to the letters that the Cars had received as well. Due to this, the police decided to put David Berkowitz's home under surveillance. At some point during the night, a figure emerged from the home holding a paper bag. The man was heavy with dark hair and walked slowly towards a Ford Galaxy. This time, the police waited for the man to get into the car and put the paper bag on the passenger seat. "Let's go," a police officer yelled, and the rest of the officers advanced. Still smiling, he answered, "I'm Sam, David Berkowitz." On the day of Berkowitz's arrest, Sergeant Joseph Coffey was called in to interview him. David told him about each shooting calmly and openly. When the interview ended, there was no doubt that Berkowitz was the son of Sam. The details he provided about each attack was information only the killer would know. At the end of the session, Berkowitz wished him a good night. Now the question was, who even was David Berkowitz anyway, and how did he become the son of Sam? Although David did not start life in the most favorable of circumstances, he grew up in a middle-class family with loving adoptive parents who showered him with the gifts and attention. His real mother, Betty Broder, grew up in the Belford, Seymour section of Brooklyn. The family was poor, and she struggled to make ends meet during the Great Depression. Her Jewish family opposed her marriage to Tony Falcon, who was Italian. They scraped together money to build a fish market in 1939. Then Betty had a daughter, Rosalind. After that, the marriage did not go well, and Tony left her for another woman. The fish market imploded, and Betty had to raise Rosalind by herself. The loneliness of being a single parent was eased when she began a relationship with a married man named Joseph Kleinman. But things went wrong when she became pregnant. Kleinman refused to pay child support and promised to leave her if she did not give up the child. Even before David was born on June 1st, 1953, he had arranged for his adoption. Her grief at giving away her child was somewhat softened at the knowledge that a good Jewish couple was willing to adopt her son. With the newborn gone, Betty began a relationship with Kleinman until he passed away from cancer in 1965. David was fortunate enough to be adopted by Nat and Pearl Berkowitz, a childless couple who were devoted to their new son. He had a normal childhood in the Bronx with no clear warning signs of what was to come. Perhaps the most important factor in his childhood was that he was lonely. His parents were not very socially oriented, and therefore neither was David. He was always big for his age and always felt different and less attractive than his peers. During his youth, he also felt uncomfortable around other people. He had one sport, baseball, that he played well. Neighbors remember him as a handsome but violent boy, a bully who attacked neighborhood children for no apparent reason. He was hyperactive and difficult for Pearl and Nat to control. He grew older and told detectives of how he felt controlled by a demonic presence that spoke to him in the form of a dog. He explained that when he returned to his job as a security guard at IBI Security in January, he moved from his small Bronx apartment to Jack and Nan Casara's two-family home in Yonkers. He wanted a 2-year lease and paid a $200 deposit. The Casara's German Shepherd was a noisy dog and often howled. The neighbor's dogs barked back. In David's mind, demons lived in dogs, and their howling was how they told David to hunt for blood, the blood of beautiful young women. Berkowitz was Berkowitz was later tried and convicted of the murders and received life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 1979, Berkowitz was interviewed 3 times in Attica prison by FBI veteran Robert Ressler. Berkowitz was allowed to keep a scrapbook where he compiled all of the newspaper accounts of the murders. He used these albums to keep his imagination alive. Ressler explained that he didn't buy the demon dog theory at all, and finally managed to get the truth out of Berkowitz. The demon story was to protect him if and when he was caught, so he could try to convince the authorities that he was crazy. He confessed to Ressler that his real reason for shooting women was his indignation against his mother and his inability to build good relationships with women. Now, that was a lot. That is also a summarized story of the Son of Sam. He's done so many interviews. I've read them. I've read all his letters. He was definitely deeply disturbed. Now, I don't know how far the psychosis of it goes. We can never really know for sure exactly what was going on in his mind, though he did admit, as I said, to making up the whole demon dog thing, which at the time was absolutely crazy because that was his entire thing. David Berkowitz is actually still alive, like right now. Just as a by the way sort of point. And I guess what was so terrifying about David Berkowitz was that, sure, he did target women, but his victimology wasn't extremely specific. He murdered a lot of women, different ages, different looks, different hair color, all of those things. And he also attempted to murder, and I believe murdered a few men as well in the process. So what was terrifying about him was that he was just going out on the street and just shooting people. So you never really knew if you would become a target or not, or if you were susceptible